Everyone knows Alexander Graham Bell invented the telephone. March 7th, 1876. Patent number 174,465. The most valuable patent ever issued. But almost nobody talks about how he understood it. The real genius wasn't just putting wire and magnets together. He was seeing sound itself differently. A dead man's ear showed him the way. Bell didn't start with telephones. He started with silence. Born March 3rd, 1847 in Edinburgh. His mother, Eliza Grace Simons, was nearly deaf. His father, Alexander Melville Bell, taught speech to people who couldn't hear. His grandfather taught elocution in London. 3 generations chasing the same ghost. How do you make the invisible visible? How do you teach someone to speak a language they've never heard? Young Alexander would press his mouth against his mother's forehead. Clear, modulated tones. She could feel the vibrations through her skull, hear him with reasonable clarity. That's not teaching, that's desperation turning into discovery. Sound isn't just air moving, it's pressure, it's waves you can feel. By age 11, he added Graham to his name. By 16, he was teaching elocution at Westonhouse Academy in Elgin. Board and 10 pounds per session, teaching what his family knew. Making the deaf speak. 1864. His father invents visible speech, a system of symbols representing every sound humans can make. Inverted F shapes, Y-shaped letters, omegas for consonants, lines through horseshoes for vowels, symbols for tone pitch suction. The idea was simple. Deaf pupils move their tongues to match the symbols, follow the chart, produce sounds, even if not completely intelligible. Melville Bell toured the United States in 1868, selling the system. Alexander went to London in 1868 to teach it at Susanna Hull's School for Deaf Children. Results were impressive at demonstrations, universities, schools. But the system had a problem. The gap between the symbol and the sound was still too wide. 1870. Both of Bell's brothers died from tuberculosis. Melville Bell moved the family to Brantford, Ontario, supposedly healthier climate, protect the one surviving son. 1871, Alexander moved to Boston, taught visible speech at the Boston School for Deaf Mutes. 1872, professor of vocal physiology and elocution at Boston University. Opened his own private school teaching articulation to deaf people. George Sanders, deaf son of Thomas Sanders. Thomas would later invest in Bell's telephone company. Mabel Hubbard, deaf daughter of Gardner Green Hubbard, prominent Boston attorney, president of Clark School. Bell married her in 1877. Hubbard would help form the Bell Telephone Company. But Bell wanted more than symbols. He wanted his deaf students to see what sound looked like. Actually see it, not just follow abstract shapes. 1874. He studied a French phonautograph at the Institute of Technology in Boston. The device channeled sound into a cone. Vibrations hit a stretched membrane. A stylus attached to the membrane traced lines on smoked glass. Visual sound. Bell thought if his students could see the difference between their voice patterns and correct speech, they could improve. But the membrane wasn't sensitive enough. The tracings weren't precise. Bell met Clarence Blake, an aurist, ear specialist. Bell explained what he needed. Blake suggested something radical. Why use an artificial membrane when you have the real thing? Use a human ear itself, taken from a dead man. As a phonautograph, Bell asked where he could get a dead man's ear. Blake said he'd get it for him. No explanation of whose ear, no record of consent, likely from an executed criminal or poor person whose body went unclaimed. Maybe a black person whose grave was robbed. The historical record is silent on the source, but Blake's professional milieu made such acquisitions normal, bodies for experimentation, for research, for progress. Summer 1874. Bell took the human ear home, a section of skull, the ear canal, the eardrum, the ossicle bones. He moistened the membrane with glycerin and water, restored mobility to the parts, attached a piece of hay to one of the little bones, the malleus and incus, set up an apparatus to drag smoked glass underneath. Through a speaking trumpet, he spoke into that dead man's ear, obtained beautiful tracings of vibrations on the glass. Each vowel had its own shape. E, A, ah, sung at the same pitch, same force, but characterized by distinct patterns. Every sound has a particular motion in air particles. Then Bell noticed something. The disproportion. The eardrum was thin as tissue paper, hardly the size of a fingernail. But it moved bones, heavy bones, massive compared to the membrane, a thin membrane controlling bones of immense size and weight. Bell wrote about this moment. While engaged in ear phonautograph experiments, he was struck by this remarkable disproportion. It occurred to him, if a membrane that thin could control the vibration of bones that heavy, why shouldn't a larger, thicker membrane be able to vibrate a piece of iron in front of an electromagnet? The telephone became complete in his mind. All he had to do was attach a steel reed, not tuned to any definite pitch, to the center of a stretched membrane, just like in the phonautograph, so it would vibrate in front of an electromagnet. Put another at the other end of the wire, voice traveling through metal. But Bell wasn't working on telephones yet. He was trying to fix the telegraph. Samuel Morse's invention from 1843 made nearly instantaneous communication possible between distant points. But it had drawbacks, required hand delivery of messages between telegraph stations and recipients. Only one message could be transmitted at a time. By the 1870s, inventors were racing to send multiple messages simultaneously over the same wire. Western Union had acquired Joseph Stearns's duplex in 1870, 2 messages at once. Thomas Edison created the quadruplex, 4 messages simultaneously. The prize was a multiplex system, 10 or more channels on one wire. Whoever cracked it would own the telegraph industry. Bell's approach was different. He called it the harmonic telegraph, based on acoustic resonance. Several notes could be sent simultaneously along the same wire if the notes differed in pitch, like a piano wire humming back when you sing into it at the right frequency. Bell had learned this trick in his youth. Standing by a piano, sing a pure note. The corresponding wire vibrates, plays the note back. Same principle could work for telegraph signals. Use vibrating reeds tuned to different frequencies at the sending end. Have matching reeds tuned to the same frequencies at the receiving end. Each receiving reed responds only to its matching transmitting reed. Frequency division and multiplexing. No crosstalk between channels. Bell began experimenting in 1872. Used tuning forks first, then vibrating reeds and electromagnets, each reed tuned to a specific audio frequency. By October 1874, his research had progressed enough that he told Gardner Hubbard about the possibility of a multiple telegraph. Hubbard resented Western Union's absolute control, instantly saw the potential for breaking the monopoly, gave Bell financial backing. February 27th, 1875, the Bell Patent Association formed. Really just a contract. Bell Hubbard and Thomas Sanders each held third interests. Watson would get 10% in September 1876. The goal was clear. Develop patents, sell them to Western Union, make everyone rich. Thomas Watson was 21, worked for Charles Williams, Jr., manufacturer of electrical supplies at 109 Court Street, Boston. Watson had been assigned to make Bell's experimental apparatus. Young electrician, good with his hands. Bell was 28. Professor who knew sound and speech but weak on electrical currents and electromagnetism. Watson knew circuits, Bell knew acoustics. They needed each other. If you value documented scientific history and innovation stories like this, subscribe. It's the best way to support our work. Also comment from which city you're hearing this from. This script is researched and factual using sources from the Science Museum Group Journal article on Bell and Blake's ear phonautograph reconstruction, published July 2025 by Tom Everett in the Library of Congress, Alexander Graham Bell, Family Papers archived digital collection, which contains Bell's laboratory notebooks, drawings, and correspondence from 1873 through 1876. Now back to the information. March 1875. Bell met Joseph Henry, director of the Smithsonian Institution, respected scientist. Bell explained his telephone ideas. Henry listened, offered encouraging words, saw great potential, urged Bell to pursue it. But Hubbard and Sanders wanted the harmonic telegraph. That's where the money was. Multiple messages, telegraph efficiency. Bell worked both projects. Harmonic telegraph openly, telephone secretly with Watson. June 2nd, 1875. The accident. The moment everything changed. Bell and Watson were testing harmonic telegraph transmitters. 5th floor, top floor, 109 Court Street, Charles Williams' electrical shop. 2 adjacent front rooms. They had several transmitters, different sized reeds, various frequencies, connected by single wire to corresponding receivers. Watson was in one room, Bell in another. One of the transmitting reeds had been wound too tightly around the pole of its electromagnet. The adjusting screw screwed down too far. Watson tried to free it, snapped the reed, plucked it. The circuit remained closed through the screw while the reed vibrated over the electromagnet pole. Bell heard it, faint but distinct. A twang. Not a make and break current like Morse code, not dots and dashes. A continuous tone, the overtones. The harmonic complexity, an undulating current. Bell burst into Watson's room. "What did you do?" Watson explained. "The stuck reed." Bell understood immediately. They plucked reeds all that day. Proof that a wave-like current produced by an armature vibrating in front of an electromagnet was powerful enough for practical effects. The telephone Bell had imagined since summer 1874 was really a practical thing. He instantly gave instructions to have the first telephone made. Everything had to be learned. Would permanent magnets or electromagnets work better? What thickness for the armature, what size, how to fasten it to gold beater's skin for the membrane. June was feverish. Experiments stacked on experiments. July 1st, 1875. Bell instructed Watson to build a receiver. Stretched diaphragm of gold beater's skin. Armature of magnetized iron attached to its middle. Free to vibrate in front of an electromagnet pole connected to the line. Second membrane device built as transmitter. The gallows phone, named for the wooden frame shape. Tested between rooms in Bell's house at 5 Extra Place Boston and the cellar underneath. Bell in the workroom, Watson in the cellar. Bell spoke into his instrument. "Do you understand what I say?" Watson answered, "Yes." But voice sounds weren't distinct. Armature tended to stick to the electromagnet pole. Tear the membrane. Close, but not there yet. Bell filed a patent application February 14, 1876. Gardner Hubbard, acting on Bell's instructions, submitted it to the U.S. Patent Office, entitled Improvement in Telegraphy. Didn't even mention the word telephone. The application described transmitting vocal or other sounds telegraphically by causing electrical undulations, similar in form to the vibrations of air accompanying the sounds. Multiple embodiments listed. Electromagnetic induction via vibrating reeds or magnets, variable resistance mechanisms, loose metallic contacts. Liquid conductors where a vibrating electrode altered resistance in an electrolyte solution. 2 hours later that same day. Elisha Gray filed a caveat at the same office. Gray was an expert electrician, manufacturer of a telegraph equipment from Highland Park, Illinois. His caveat outlined transmitting vocal sounds telegraphically. Object was transmitting tones of the human voice through a telegraphic circuit, reproducing them at the receiving end. Gray described a liquid microphone, metal needle or rod placed barely into a liquid conductor, water-acid mixture. Diaphragm vibrations make the needle dip more or less into the liquid, varying electrical resistance, thus varying the current passing through to the receiver. Bell's application was entry number 5 that day. Gray's was 39th. In patent law, when two patents have overlapping similarities, this triggers interference proceedings. Determine which inventor gets the patent. Both Gray and Bell's documents incorporated a liquid transmitter. Wire vibrating in water. Gray claimed it was his idea first, but Bell's laboratory notebooks archived at the Library of Congress show experiments with liquid-based transmitters dating to October 1873. Cup of mercury as variable resistance element. Modulate electrical signals. Late 1875, Bell's entries detailed efforts to transmit harmonic tones and undulating currents via liquid interfaces. Building on his 1874 harmonic telegraph prototypes. Entries, initialed by witnesses including Watson, demonstrate progression from telegraphy harmonics to speech modulation. Trial and error with acidified water and mercury. Predating Gray's documented ideas by months. March 3, 1876. Bell's 29th birthday, patent allowed. March 7th, patent issued. U.S. patent number 174,465. Arguably the most important patent ever recorded. March 10th, late at night. Testing a new transmitter design. The liquid transmitter. Bell spilled some of the liquid acid on himself. Shouted, "Mr. Watson, come here, I want to see you." Watson down the hall in another room heard him over the device. The telephone had been invented. First intelligible message transmitted electrically. Bell's laboratory notes describe it. 2 rooms at 5, Extra Place, Boston. Bell's bedroom, the laboratory at the rear. Test wire ran between them. The liquid transmitter consisted of a diaphragm, a needle, a small cup of water. Water able to conduct electricity with addition of acid. Speech projected on diaphragm. Diaphragm vibrates. Attached needle vibrates in accordance. Needle dips in and out of the cup. Varying resistance of battery circuit. Creates undulating current necessary for electrical transmission of articulate speech. Watson, in the bedroom. Reed receiver pressed against his ear. Heard and understood what Bell said. The principle Bell discovered. Electrical undulations created by gradual changes of intensity exactly analogous to changes in density of air from simple pendulous vibrations. When sound is uttered into a cone, that motion sets a membrane in vibration. Membrane vibration causes an armature to take part in the motion. Armature motion creates electrical undulations on the circuit. When represented graphically, these vibrations are similar in form to initial vibrations from the sound. Rate of oscillation in electrical current corresponds to rate of vibration of the inducing body. That is the pitch of sound produced. Intensity of current varies with amplitude of vibration. That is the loudness of sound. Features of current encode features of sound. But the liquid transmitter wasn't practical for commercial products. Too messy, too unstable. Bell focused on improving the electromagnetic telephone after March 1876. Never used Gray's liquid transmitter in public demonstrations or commercial use. By June 1875, they had proven different. Tones would vary the strength of electric current in a wire. Built working transmitter with membrane capable of varying electronic currents. Receiver that reproduced variations in audible frequencies. June 25, 1876. Philadelphia Centennial Exhibition. First World's Fair in the United States, celebrating America's 100th birthday. Gardner Hubbard was a commissioner, arranged for Bell's devices to be displayed. Small table in Department of Education, modest display labeled telegraphic and telephonic apparatus by A. Graham Bell. Included harmonic telegraph system, method of transmitting articulate speech electrically. 2 membrane diaphragm magnetotelephones, could be used as transmitters or receivers. One had single pole electromagnet, other had double pole. Armature of each was small piece of steel, spring glued to center of membrane, 3 inches in diameter. Also displayed was iron box receiver, electromagnet enclosed in hollow iron box, iron lid used as armature, thin circular metallic diaphragm, resting by edge on rim. Central portion, not quite touching electromagnet pole underneath. Receiver could be placed in circuit with membrane telephones, ear pressed against box lid. Articulation from person speaking into membrane telephone was audible from the lid. 50 judges approached the display. End of long hot day. Sunday, June 25th. Brazil's Emperor Pedro II was present. Scottish physicist Sir William Thomson. They tested it. Bell spoke into the device. Thomson held the receiver, heard Bell's voice. The words, "To be or not to be, that is the question. What hath God wrought?" A horse my kingdom for a horse. Generally understood after a few repetitions. Sounds were weak, only heard when ear was close to earphone, but they were distinct. Occasionally a sentence would come out with startling distinctness. Difficult to believe, speaker wasn't close at hand. Bell continued demonstrations. May 10th, 1876. Lecture to American Academy of Arts and Sciences. Described undulating current. Electric speaking telephone. Made clear the essential factor wasn't a specific form of instrument, not apparatus with definite structural peculiarities, not combining certain parts into an operating whole. It was understanding that electrical undulations could replicate sound vibrations, that a membrane could control an armature, that an electromagnet could transduce those vibrations into current, that current could travel over wire, that another electromagnet could reverse the process, turn current back into vibration, vibration back into sound. August 10th, 1876. Third test in southern Ontario. Bell made a call via telegraph line from family homestead in Brantford to his assistant in Paris, Ontario, 13 kilometers away. October 9th, 1876. First two-way reciprocal conversation over a line between Cambridge and Boston. Roughly 2.5 miles. Bell was on Kilby Street in Boston. Watson at offices of Walworth Manufacturing Company. They talked by telephone to each other over a 2-mile wire stretched between the locations. First wire conversation ever held. January 30th, 1877. Bell patented an improved design. Double electromagnet replaced by single permanently magnetized bar magnet. Small coil or bobbin of fine wire surrounding one pole. Thin disc of iron fixed and circular mouthpiece in front. Disc served as combined diaphragm and armature. Speaking into mouthpiece, the iron diaphragm vibrated with voice in magnetic field of bar magnet pole. Caused undulatory currents in coil. Currents traveled through wire to distant receiver. Received in identical apparatus. Sounds were weak, could only be heard when ear was close. But they were distinct. July 1877. Gardner Green Hubbard formed the Bell Telephone Company. Exploit the invention. Bell and his partners had offered to sell the patent to Western Union for $100,000, equal to $2,952,813 today. Western Union president balked. The telephone was nothing but a toy. 2 years later, he told colleagues if he could get the patent for $25 million, equal to $814,568,966 today. He'd consider it a bargain. Bell Company no longer wanted to sell. Bell's investors became millionaires. He fared well from residuals. At one point, had assets of nearly $1 million. From 1878 to 1888, the Bell Telephone Company faced 587 court challenges to its patents. 5 went to U.S. Supreme Court, none successful in establishing priority over Bell's original patent. Bell Company never lost a case that proceeded to final trial stage. March 19, 1888. Supreme Court ruled 4-3 to affirm patent validity. Bell was first to invent practical telephone, discovered that magnetoelectric current undulated properly, even though prosecution had died, even though both Bell patents, number 174,465, dated March 7, 1876, and number 186,787, dated January 30th, 1877, were no longer in effect. Presiding judges agreed to continue proceedings. Case importance as precedent. U.S. Attorney General dropped lawsuit November 30th, 1897. Some issues left undecided on merits. The controversy never fully died. Antonio Mucci claimed to have created first working model of telephone in Italy in 1834, filed caveat patent. Didn't renew it on expiry in 1874, perhaps lacked financial resources. June 11, 2002, U.S. Congress declared honor should go to Mucci. In Italy, he's credited as official inventor. But Bell held the patent. Bell built the business. Bell made it work. What Bell understood that others missed: sound isn't just vibration, it's information encoded in vibration. Pitch is frequency, loudness is amplitude, timbre is harmonic complexity. The human ear is a transducer. Converts mechanical vibration into neural signals. 3 tiny bones, malleus, incus, stapes, move in response to eardrum vibration, transfer energy to cochlea. If bones that small and heavy can be moved by membrane that thin, then a larger membrane can move an iron armature. If an armature can move in a magnetic field, it can induce current. If current varies with the vibration, it carries the information. If that current reaches another electromagnet, it can vibrate another armature, another membrane, reproduce the original sound. Bell didn't invent electromagnetic induction. Michael Faraday did that in 1831. Bell didn't invent the membrane diaphragm. Edward Leon Scott de Martinville used one in his phonautograph in 1857. Bell didn't invent variable resistance. Multiple people explored it. What Bell did was connect them, see that the ear's mechanical advantage, thin membrane controlling heavy bones, could be replicated electrically, membrane controlling current, current controlling membrane, voice traveling as electricity. The ear phonautograph was the key, that dead man's ear. Lost to history now. No one has reported seeing the instrument in more than a century. Canada Science and Technology Museum reconstructed it in 2017, used 3D printed ear instead of real one, to understand the design, to revisit the history, to contribute to conversations about origins, politics, legacy of Bell's early work. But the original is gone. The tracings Bell made. The vowel sound A at 896 vibrations per second, E at 1,792, I at 2,304, O at 1,632. Upper line representing sound curve. Stylus attached to malleus and incus. Lower line same vowel 1 octave higher. Beautiful proof that every sound has its shape, its signature in vibration. Bell later called the telephone an intrusion on his real work as scientist, refused to have telephone in his study. Considered his greatest contribution not the invention, but his work on behalf of oral education. Like to say he was foremost a teacher of deaf children, like his father. Everything he did came back to that, making the invisible visible, making the inaudible tangible, his mother's deafness, his wife's deafness, his students, visible speech, the ear phonautograph, the harmonic telegraph, all roads leading to the same place. Understanding that sound is structure. That structure can be preserved, transmitted, reproduced. 1885. Bell co-founded American Telephone and Telegraph Company. AT&T would become telecommunications giant. Direct descendant of the Bell Telephone Company Hubbard formed in 1877. By the 1890s, telephone was spreading. First telephone line, late April 1877. Connected merchants shop with his home. Rented in pairs, connect discrete locations. Then central exchanges opened. Switchboards. Calls could be routed between locations. Dramatically improved usefulness. No longer just point-to-point. A network. January 25th, 1915. First transcontinental telephone call. Bell in New York. Watson in San Francisco. 3,400 miles apart. 39 years after their first conversation. Bell said the ceremonial words. "Mr. Watson, come here, I want to see you." Watson replied, "It would take me a week to get to you this time." The same two men, the same greeting. But the distance had collapsed. Voice traveling 3,400 miles. Electrical undulations carrying information across a continent. Bell's other inventions. Photophone in 1880. Used light to transmit sound, property of selenium crystal. Electrical conductivity dependent on intensity of light exposure, transmitting light beam from sunlight. System of mirror lens, cell to remove heat radiation. Light rays on motion-sensitive mirror. Picked up sound vibrations. Motion created distortions in reflected light beam. Parabolic mirror-focused distorted light on selenium detector. Detector created correspondingly interrupted electrical signals. Signals sent to telephone magnet, converted back to sound through electromagnet connected to diaphragm. Range never extended beyond a few hundred yards, failed to protect transmissions from outside interference, clouds, weather. But principle was sound, light carrying information, precursor to fiber optics, groundbreaking work in optical telecommunications, hydrofoils, aeronautics. Bell held 18 patents in his name, 12 he shared with collaborators, worked on metal detector to find bullet in President James Garfield, unsuccessful attempt, worked on techniques for teaching speech to deaf, American Association to promote. Teaching of speech to deaf, founded 1890, later renamed Alexander Graham Bell Association for Deaf and Hard of Hearing. A.G. Bell offers education funding supports public policy. But the deaf community has complicated feelings about Bell. He encouraged speech therapy and lip reading over sign language, outlined this in 1898 paper, belief that with resources and effort, deaf could be taught to read lips and speak. Oralism, enabling their integration with wider society. The deaf community criticized this, could cause closure of deaf schools, what some consider eugenicist ideas. Memoir upon the formation of a deaf variety of the human race. Bell observed if deaf people married other deaf people, this could result in emergence of deaf race. 1880. Second International Congress on Education of Deaf passed resolution, mandating teaching of oral communication, banning signing in schools, loss of sign language considered by many a detriment to deaf community of America. Bell's legacy is mixed. Inventor, yes. Businessman, yes. But also someone whose personal circumstances, mother's deafness, wife's deafness, shaped his life's work in ways both generative and harmful. Push for oralism, resistance to sign language, came from same impulse that drove the telephone. Make the invisible visible, make communication possible. But who decides what form communication takes? Who benefits? Who loses? August 2nd, 1922. Bell died at Bainbrig. Beautiful mountain. His estate in Nova Scotia, Canada, buried at top of hill there, 75 years old. On day of his burial, minute of silence observed by telephone system. North America's telephones stopped ringing. Tribute to man who made them possible. Standard unit for intensity of sound waves named the bell in 1920s. Decibel, 1/10 of a bell, most commonly used metric for measuring magnitude of noise. His name in the lexicon, in the physics, in the measurement of what he spent his life trying to understand. 2017 reconstruction project reveals something unexpected. The ear phonotograph's design was less refined than previously assumed. Preliminary findings from Canada Science and Technology Museum, working from Bell and Blake's reports. Photographs from 1876, line drawing from 1877, glass plate etching. Bell produced, vowel sound ah, sung in key of G, inscription signed by Bell. They found the instrument was cruder than the elegant description suggested. Challenges in getting it to work. Materials, horsehair bristles, cane fibers, split bamboo, testing different stylus materials. Blake wrote, stylus constitution was matter of considerable importance, very light and firm, sufficiently elastic to bend when pressed on glass, stiff enough to have little vibration of its own. The mouthpiece, bell-shaped, purpose straightforward. Collect sound waves from human speaker, funnel sounds into tube leading to auditory canal of excised middle ear. Moving glass assembly, microscope-based structure, components added, mouthpiece, ear attachment, thumb screw to tighten skull fragment. When user spoke, sound waves traveled down mouthpiece into exposed canal, collided with eardrum. Chain reaction. Eardrum vibrated, ossicle bones, then stylus, small piece of straw attached to final bone. When smoked, glass plate pulled quickly underneath, speech vibrations etched as continuous waveform across surface. Could be read to determine shape pattern speech vibrations produced. Blake published 2 reports, 1875 and 1876, detailed descriptions, but some details missing. Reconstruction team had to infer, experiment, try different configurations. 3D scan of human skull, section digitally excised, printed, attached to instrument, not perfect, but functional enough to demonstrate principle. Sound writing with biological transducer. The darkness in this story. Whose ear was it? Bell and Blake never revealed. From whom? On what basis acquired the human ear? Historical conditions suggest likely sources. Executed criminal. Poor person whose body unclaimed. Perhaps black person whose grave robbed. All of above? Jonathan Stern remarks. Blake's casual attitude toward ears likely came from professional milieu. Acquisition of bodies for experimentation research considered norm. Anecdotal evidence suggests Bell may have been more self-conscious, strategically so, about how public might respond to uncomfortable realities. Strangeness of carrying machine consisting in part of human ear. This is the foundation the telephone was built on, not just electromagnetic induction, not just variable resistance, but also the casual extraction of body parts from the dead and powerless, the use of human tissue as experimental apparatus, without consent, without acknowledgement, progress built on unnamed bodies, on people reduced to resources. The ear that taught Bell about membranes and bones, about mechanical advantage and transduction, belonged to someone who didn't choose to be part of this story, someone whose name we'll never know. Bell's genius was real. His understanding of sound was profound. The connection between the ear's anatomy and the telephone's mechanics, between biological transduction and electrical transduction. That insight changed the world. Created an industry, connected continents, made conversation over distance possible, shaped how we communicate for more than a century. But genius doesn't happen in vacuum. It happens in specific times, specific places, with specific access to resources, to knowledge, to bodies. The telephone patent, filed February 14th, 1876. Issued March 7th. First intelligible message, March 10th. Commercial production by 1877, network by 1880s, transcontinental by 1915. All from the principle Bell saw, that undulating current could carry information, that electrical variations could encode acoustic variations. The story starts with a mother who couldn't hear, father who taught speech, grandfather who taught voice, family business of making sound visible, starts with visible speech symbols. With phonautograph tracings, with Dead Man's Ear, with Watson plucking a stuck reed, with months of feverish experimentation, with membrane and armature and electromagnet, with the realization that everything he'd learned about sound, about anatomy, about resonance, about electricity, could be combined into something new. The genius wasn't inventing pieces. The genius was seeing the connection, that the ear's disproportion. Thin membrane, heavy bones. Wasn't a limitation, was a feature, was exactly what made transduction possible. Energy transfer from one medium to another, air to mechanical, mechanical to electrical, electrical back to mechanical, mechanical back to air. Information preserved through transformations, that's what the telephone does, that's what Bell understood. Others were close, Elisha Gray, Antonio Mucci, Johann Philipp Reis, Daniel Drawbaugh, all working on similar principles, variable resistance, vibrating diaphragms, electrical transmission of sound, but Bell got there first, or got the patent first, or understood it most completely, or had better backers, or better luck, or all of above. History belongs to who files the patent, who wins the court cases, who builds the company, who gets remembered. Bell spent rest of his life after 1880s on other projects. Lost interest in telephony, technical advisor until early 1880s, then moved on. Optical telecommunications, hydrofoils, aeronautics, wide-ranging interests, some more successful than others. But the telephone was done. The principle proven, the business established. We remember him for the telephone, not for the deaf students, not for visible speech, not for the ear phonautograph, not for the harmonic telegraph, just the telephone. March 7th, 1876. Patent number 174,465. Mr. Watson, come here, I want to see you. The sound of history being made, the sound of distance collapsing, the sound of voice traveling through wire. The Canada Science and Technology Museum reconstruction sits in sound by design exhibition in Ottawa. Visitors can see how the instrument worked. Understand the connection to the telephone, but the original is lost, disappeared in the last 140 years, lost like the person whose ear it was. Bell's understanding of voice over wire was genius, but it was situated genius. Genius that required his family background, his work with deaf students, his knowledge of anatomy and acoustics, his access to bodies for experimentation, his partnership with Watson, his financial backing from Hubbard and Sanders, his timing in patent office, his legal victories, his business acumen. Remove any piece and the story changes. Add Antonio Mucci's earlier work. Add Gray's liquid transmitter. Add the unnamed person whose ear showed Bell the principle. The story gets more complex, more truthful, less about lone genius, more about networks of people and knowledge and power and circumstance. The telephone revolutionized communication, created industries, employed millions, connected the world, made distance less relevant, made relationships possible across space, changed how we do business, how we maintain friendships, how we fall in love, how we grieve, how we exist in relation to each other. All because Bell saw that thin membrane could control heavy bones, that this principle could be replicated with electricity. That voice could travel as undulating current, that distance could be overcome with wire and electromagnets and understanding. That's the genius, not just the invention, the understanding, the seeing of connection between disparate things, anatomy and electricity, sound and current, membrane and armature, the recognition that natural transduction in the ear could be mimicked artificially, that what biology did, mechanically technology could do electromagnetically. that information could be preserved through medium changes, that electricity could become voice again, that we could hear each other across distances that would have seemed impossible before. Library of Congress holds the Bell family papers, over 200 volumes of laboratory notebooks, drawings, correspondence, patent applications, court documents. One notebook from October 1875 to November 1876 contains 252 pages, 225 separate drawings. Page 35, March 10th, 1876. The famous words? The turning point. The story we tell about Bell is usually simple. Inventor of telephone, lone genius. March 7th, 1876. Patent. Success, fortune, legacy? But the real story is messier, longer, more collaborative, more compromised. Starts with his mother's deafness, his father's teaching, his students, his experiments, his partners, his backers, his competitors, his legal battles, his ethical failings regarding deaf community, his use of unclaimed bodies for research, his privilege as white man in Boston with access to capital and institutions, his brilliance in seeing connections, his persistence in pursuing them, his luck in timing, his ruthlessness in defending his claims. All of it together makes the telephone possible. Not just the genius, the context, the network, the time, the place, the access, the understanding, the vision, the execution, the business, the luck, the compromises, the costs paid by others, the unnamed whose bodies became instruments, the deaf students whose languages were suppressed, the competitors whose work was eclipsed, the partners whose contributions were minimized, all part of the story, all necessary to tell it truthfully. What remains a century and a half later, the telephone in our pockets, not connected by wire anymore, but by radio waves and fiber optics, not transmitting continuous electrical current, but digital packets, not using electromagnets and diaphragms, but microphones and speakers and signal processors and compression algorithms. Technology transformed beyond recognition, but principle the same. Voice converted to signal, signal transmitted over distance, signal converted back to voice, transduction, transmission, transduction. What Bell understood in 1874, looking at Dead Man's Ear, what he patented in 1876. What he demonstrated in Philadelphia, what became Bell Telephone Company, what became AT and T, what became Global Telecommunications Network, what became the connected world we live in. His genius was understanding that sound is information, that information can be encoded, that encoding can be transmitted, that transmission can be decoded, that the whole process preserves what matters, the meaning, the voice, the connection, not perfectly. Early telephones were weak and crackly. Modern ones have delays and compression artifacts, but good enough, clear enough, to have conversation, to hear the person, to maintain relationship across distance. That's what the telephone does. That's what Bell made possible. The way he understood voice over wire, the membrane principle, the transduction principle, the undulating current principle, the electromagnetic principle, the variable resistance principle, all pieces known before, but Bell assembled them, saw how they fit, understood why they worked, built working device, got it patented, got it commercialized, got it deployed, changed the world. That's the genius. Not inventing from nothing, seeing pattern in chaos, connection in fragments, possibility in principle, making it real, making it work, making it matter. In 1877, Bell wrote about the ear phonograph experiments. While engaged in these experiments, he was struck with remarkable disproportion in weight between membrane and bones vibrated by it. It occurred to him that if membrane as thin as tissue paper could control vibration of bones that were compared to it of immense size and weight, why should not larger and thicker membrane be able to vibrate piece of iron in front of electromagnet? The telephone was born in that moment. In recognizing that biological principle, mechanical advantage, could be translated to technology, that nature's solution to transduction. Thin membrane controlling heavy bones could be reimagined with different materials, different energy, same information transfer. That's genius. That recognition, that translation, that making real what was previously just principle, turning Dead Man's Ear into living technology, turning observation into invention, turning understanding into transformation. The way Alexander Graham Bell understood voice over wire was much more genius than we imagine. Not just putting pieces together, seeing why pieces could go together, understanding mechanism, grasping principle, recognizing possibility, having vision to pursue it, skill to execute it, luck to patent it, resources to commercialize it, persistence to defend it, all of it necessary, all of it genius. All of it situated in specific time, place, person, circumstance. All of it built on unnamed contributions. All of it changing world forever. That's the story. Not just March 7th, 1876, not just patent, not just Mr. Watson, come here, I want to see you, but years of family teaching about speech, mother's deafness, father's visible speech system, students in Boston, phonograph experiments, dead man's ear revealing principle. Harmonic telegraph leading to accident. Watson plucking stuck reed. June 2nd, 1875. Twang heard across room. Months of experimentation, partnership with Watson, backing from Hubbard Sanders, competition with Gray Edison, Mucci, others, patent filing, court battles, commercial development, network building, century and a half of technological evolution. All from seeing that membrane could control bones, could control current, could control membrane, could carry voice across distance. All from understanding sound as information that could be preserved through transformation. All from genius that was both individual and collective, both brilliant and compromised, both transformative and troubling. That's how Bell understood voice over wire. That's why it mattered. That's why we're still living in a world he helped create.